on YouTube. But
Yep.
first thing someone said, bro, I never knew Scuba was English.
What did you think that I was? I mean, actually, some people thought I was German because I was living in Berlin for such a long time. But I'm fucking English, man. I was born in Islington. I'm a Londoner, full-on Londoner, born and bred. First 27 years of my life, I lived in London, apart from 3 years at Bristol Uni. But yeah, where did you grow up?
I grew up in the bustling metropolis of Evansville, Indiana.
Oh wow, okay.
And
right.
you know, I think this will date you back to the first time I ever saw you was in Detroit. You were playing at the festival stage.
Yeah.
Right by the river.
Oh yeah, when
right around the time that Feel It track had come out.
Yeah, it was like 2011, I think, and Skrillex played the same stage, and it was like the kind of first. It
was like all dubstep people, and you were exiting out of that world at the time, I think.
Yeah, very much so. I had a lot of strange gigs in that period where I would show up and like play like, you know, my set, and people would be confused. I actually remember I played a set around that time, the Roxy in LA with like Plastician and Marianne Hobbs, and I came off stage and like the promoter came up to me and was just like, "Yeah, man, you had them dancing to chill out music, man." I was just like, well, okay, that was my American accent, so it was fair. But
yeah. So the person said, "I always," oh, that's Kevin, just ambivalent, saying, "I always thought Scuba was from Atlanta."
Hi, Kevin. How you doing, mate?
So, one more thing before we start getting into the nerd talk. I'm just sharing a link, and I have to show you something, Paul. I don't bust this out too often, but I'm just telling everybody. Okay, so I don't bust this out too often, but with you in isolation and being, you know, slightly socially distanced, I wanted to show you what I had on.
Nice.
And true confession to anybody that is going to start dropping Arsenal trivia on me. I don't have a Premier League team. I'm very Switzerland when it comes to the Premier League. And, but I am a big Dennis Bergkamp fan. So
nice. Yes. Classic. Last season of Dennis.
Those were good years for Arsenal, right?
Yeah. They were definitely good years. I mean, that season in particular, the red currant shirt was the lost Champions League final season, so I just remember it for that, really, which wasn't that great, but it was fun being an Arsenal fan then. It's quite, I mean, I say it's quite shit now. Actually, since I moved back to London, I've got a season ticket now, so I basically go to pretty much every game.
But it seems like you're always in a different seat. What's the story with that?
No. Basically last season I was moving around, but this season I've been in the same seat in the upper east tier east side. And it's kind of like I used to go a lot when I was a kid. And obviously, like, you know, watching it on TV is fine and you get a feel for the game and all that kind of thing. But like what you don't get when you don't go to the ground is the little kind of like narratives that like carry on from game to game, and the way different players are, you know, the kind of relationship each player has with the fans, and like, you know, all the kind of chanting, all the different songs and that kind of shit. So it's a totally, I mean, it's an obvious thing to say, but it's a totally different experience watching it live. But then particularly when you go regularly is different. But anyway, okay. Enough of that.
I always forget when I moved to Europe. I just kind of thought that everybody was into football. And I
Right.
started talking about football in the techno world, and everybody would just give me these weird looks. So we should talk about that right now.
Well, I mean, yeah, quite a lot of musicians, I suppose, they had their experience of at school of being the kind of not sport guy. I think this is a kind of common thing for particularly techno geeks.
Yeah.
But whatever. It's fun.
So
To be honest, actually, having said that, I've reflected since there's been no football. I've actually quite liked there being no football. I've just realized how much it kind of stresses me out and kind of like it takes up quite a lot of my nervous energy. So it's like, okay. Anyway, let's move on. Did you get the YouTube thing going?
Did get the YouTube thing up and running, and I'll share that link with you. I mean, at this point we're in survival mode, but I think that the thing about this streaming stuff is you can't really troubleshoot it until you go live. Or, right. I mean, maybe I'm just bad at it, but yeah. And so it's okay. I'm literally like, if you think of the most nerve-wracking gigs that you would play, I would say maybe like let's be cliche and say Berghain. I'm way more nervous going on a live stream than playing at Berghain.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it's the kind of live stream which like then is there to be watched afterwards, then yeah, that's the problem with. I mean, have you done a boiler room before or something like that?
I've not done a boiler room.
I mean, the first boiler room I did is so bad. It's like, I mean, it was just an objectively bad hour of DJing from me. And at the time it sounded good, and well, I thought it sounded good. And, people were, doing their boiler room dancing thing. But you listen to that shit back and it's fucking terrible, man. So the thing about, you're playing in a club set or whatever, wherever you're playing, if it's bad, or if there are technical inconsistencies, technical problems with it, at least it's not there for like people to fucking pour over for. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah,
so,
and no one's saying. No one can be like they're paying these people this much to do, because we're amateurs.
Yeah,
with
right.
Live stream, so no one can criticize our live stream game. So
yeah.
So you've been super helpful with just I mean, and for a long time actually, I've always thought that you've been really good with sharing. Like you did this Scuba AMA thing on Facebook, which I thought was very unique, and the way that you interact with your fans and like are actually, I just feel like it's like you're from the message board era. So
yeah, for better or worse. I mean, like, I think that the reason, I mean, you're right, I do try to kind of reach out and be of assistance to people. And I think a lot of that is because I never really had a quote unquote sort of mentor, for want of a better word, like I didn't, I got started on my own. I taught myself to mix, taught myself to produce. I taught myself how to run a label. And I really would have liked to have had someone helping me like that. So I try and do that, because I think, you can add value to people's lives by helping out in that kind of a way. So
I also,
yeah.
I mean, that was the thing whenever it was so, I mean, I was listening to heavy metal, rap music, and like industrial stuff. And I had no idea about this world of raves and techno and house music. And I remember I had gotten an email address. I had obtained an email address from one of my favorite DJs.
Oh yeah.
And it was like, it felt like I got invited to their pool party, like I would, and that was back whenever you, getting an email address felt a little bit like you were invading their private sphere, and I wrote the person and they actually wrote me back.
Right.
And it was something that was so foreign to me, with like being able to reach out and touch your favorite DJs or ask questions, and they were super helpful. So it's really cool to see people like yourself still helping out people and engaging with people. That's part of the reason why I got into this in the first place.
Yeah, totally, man. I think, and obviously with the platforms that you have now, it's much easier to do it than it ever was. I mean, certainly when I was first starting, like you say, there were message boards, but I mean, old school message boards were
That's
different. Like,
I knew that you were into message boards because I think non-compliant.
Right. Yeah.
And that was back in the Shiva days.
Yeah. Dubstep forum and all that.
And you two tend to be very opinionated on the internet, and are both incredibly kind and generous people. I'm not saying that you're the opposite of that on the internet, but both of you have gotten yourself in some hot water sometimes.
To be honest, there was a fairly long period where I think, generally speaking, you could be a lot more. I don't know. I mean, you could get away with a lot more. I mean, there was a lot more kind of like leeway, I think, to make bad jokes and be a bit satirical and without really getting into trouble. But I think there just wasn't really a consideration until the last couple of years that because I mean, obviously there's the whole cancel culture thing and that's bullshit, but also I think it's quite easy to just be kind of nasty to someone online without really thinking about it. Definitely. And I think certainly from my perspective, I certainly had, I mean, in my worst days of Twitter, I certainly just went in on people on occasion. I hope mostly with a little bit of a sense of humor to it. But when you just completely unload on someone that you don't know, it's not really very nice. And frankly, I've made an effort to not unnecessarily, just be nasty to people online, because I really think it can be, really awful, frankly. So yeah, I mean,
sometimes I feel coming from a place that is definitively more conservative than I could ever dream of being, and where I'm from, people probably think I'm as far left as you can go, and right. So it's sometimes I check on my local news sites, and I just see some things that I just, especially with this whole coronavirus thing going on, and there's a lot of conspiracy theories, and those are very rich in the little news bubbles of my hometown.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll really lay into somebody, by my standards, laying into somebody, and I'm like, I sometimes step back and I'm like, why did I do that? What did I do that to try to make things did I do that to make the world a better place? And even if I was trying to do that, did I accomplish it at the end? And right. So techno.
Yeah, techno. We need to talk about producing, man. We're supposed to be talking about producing. We did a brief preamble offline earlier, where we talked a little bit about the perceived necessity to conform to certain things.
Yes.
When you make a track, And I really think that in techno, it's as bad as it is in any form of music. And I think that like the most general possible level, the best piece of advice I could give anyone would be just to really try and not fall into that trap. I think, I mean, that's an extremely broad statement, I realize, but like, I mean, from structuring tunes in a certain way, for which obviously was a good reason, because obviously DJs like to have things like, like obviously you want your minute and a half of kick drum so you can mix it in or whatever. But like, I just think like, like breaking out of those kind of walls, like can be such a valuable thing to do. But having said that, like I completely feel the pain of any young producer or any up and coming producer who gets told sometimes by me, even as a result of demos that get sent in, no, you need to make this easier for DJs to play it, otherwise no one's going to play your tunes. But it's
I mean, I always say that techno by its nature is a pretty limited genre to begin with. And I mean, there's a certain tempo range. There's always a 4/4 time signature. So like any rules that can be kind of broken, you would probably be better off if you could break those rules. And someone I always remember, and I don't know if it was intentional or not, but I don't know if you remember these old Advent records. And
the Advent?
Yes.
So I didn't realize that was Mr. G until like a week ago.
One half, yeah.
Yeah. I left some really fanboy comment on his Instagram and he didn't reply to me.
Mr. G doesn't strike me as somebody that's on Insta, like really doing the Instagram thing.
He fucking posts all the time. He posts records.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Anyway, I used to love the Advent. I saw them many occasions out of my head as a young man at big raves in the 90s.
And the timing was never right on the tracks. They were never phrased correctly. Did you ever notice that?
But how do you mean? Do you mean like
every 32 beats?
Oh, right. Okay.
But they were so good. It was like it kind of, some of the tracks just felt kind of chaotic in nature, and it kind of added. Maybe I'm giving. I thought that music was so innovative at that time that maybe I'm just giving them a pass, but it did.
Sometimes, I mean, people do that intentionally sometimes. Someone was telling me about doing a collab with Speedy J and sort of recounting like the kind of detail that he goes into in kind of like incorporating like unpredictable shit, like supposedly unpredictable shit, like for example having like a change that comes in 2 bars early or something like that, and the sort of like military level of precision that he goes into to kind of engineer those things into the tune. So it's kind of the opposite of like having a kind of free jam, which kind of ends up, like being slightly like off kilter. And at the risk of falling on a stereotype, I thought that was quite a Northern European way of doing things, shall we say. But yeah, I mean, I think like I've got echo and I can hear myself. Hey,
it's sounding fine.
Yeah, I think that.
How's it sounding for the people on YouTube? How's it sounding? Because we're doing this. This is like a.
Are we on YouTube?
We are on YouTube.
Have you tweeted it or something?
I shared it with you. I'll share it with you in our little chat window here.
Let's see.
No, I can't. Can I do that? So yeah, if check in your email, and it's on there. But yeah, it can also be really hard. And I think that this, with going with the format of going with the idea of not trying to play by rules. I know that especially from there's a few people that are very handsomely rewarded for breaking the rules. And then everybody else kind of buys into that and follows suit. But as somebody that I think we're probably in a different tax bracket, DJ wise. You are the busiest retired DJ I've
ever played any fucking shows this year. I played a few last year, but like, I mean, I'll play at Berghain. I'm not gonna not do that. I mean, I do the occasional. If it's something I want to, something that sounds fun.
Yeah.
And it's more just like the, just the kind of, well, what my, I have a WhatsApp group of DJs and what is known as the kind of coalface shows. I just don't want to do the coalface shows anymore. Anyway, to be honest, I actually in the headspace now where I actually would quite like to do some heavy touring again. I just at the end of 2018, I was just like, no, fuck this, I'm done.
Was there a breaking point for that?
I mean, it was kind of cumulative because I tried to do less. And I basically what I said to myself was like, right, I'm gonna make sure I take more time off in 2018 and try and structure it a bit. But I actually found that was worse because like going in and out of the touring lifestyle was the tricky bit. Like it would be like when you're just touring loads and playing, 10, 12 shows a month, or whatever, you just get into this kind of constant, like it just doesn't stop and you don't get a time to breathe and it just becomes your life. And then you just get used to it. Mm-hmm. But then when trying to take one weekend off a month, or whatever, I just ended up, dreading going back to it, which is just not the way you want to look at that shit at all. DJing should not be something that you don't want to do. And like, that was how I kind of ended up feeling about it. Hang on, I'm just going to post this link.
And for everybody on Insta, I'm hearing that there is, the audio is sounding better on YouTube than Instagram. I think it's the same. It's effectively the same chat. We've got some, this is a very, Chris, I do agree I need a haircut. What do you want me to do? Chris, you were just lecturing people online about not going outside. And then I said, you know what? Chris is right. I'm going to stay inside and I'm going to let my hair grow and I'm going to let my 13-year-old mustache grow. And now you're giving me shit for needing a haircut.
Hey, Hans. How you doing, mate?
Steven.
Right.
Someone saw my dog today. My dog's more famous than I am. But yeah, so you just started dreading the more time you took off, the more you started dreading.
Yeah, man, I was just like, it was the travel as much as anything else, and what it reminded me of, when I was a young kid, I used to hate going on holiday. I used to get really homesick, like on family holidays and shit, and I just wanted to be at home. And I ended up feeling like I used to feel then. It was really weird. I had this some realization. I was like, fuck, I feel this is exactly the way I used to feel when I was like 10 years old or whatever. Which is, like I said, not how doing your dream job should be. So yeah, so I basically took most of, I did pretty, I did, I think 15 shows last year or something. So
Okay.
not many really.
For
Before
your
that
for
I was
your
doing I was doing over 100 for
oh God.
for 10 years. I did, well, I worked out, I did 15, I went on 1,500 flights in 10 years. So
That
basically
doesn't sound so fun.
three flights a week every week for 10 years. So I can kind of say that I earned a rest. But there were people who just do it for fucking decades, man. And people like Dubfire and Sven and fair enough. I completely understand the people who love the lifestyle to that extent. But it's not for everyone, and if you're not careful, it really catches up with you, frankly.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I guess like all that, I was just giving you shit about the busiest. You are the busiest retired DJ. No, I have to say. You and I think Danny Tenaglia was a pretty busy retired DJ too. But what I was saying is that with the following a structure of production, when you're at a place, and I now that everybody's career has basically, we're at ground zero career wise for everybody. But when you're in a place of trying to figure out how, it's impossible when you're worried about getting gigs and stuff to follow this, to not be pressured into what will people think of this music. And I think it ends up having people conform to a structure, which is a little paradoxical because it doesn't end up, it just kind of becomes background noise with the other 100 tracks that sound like that on a given week.
Yeah, I'm super interested to see how patterns of music, particularly dance music consumption, change as a result of this. Whether obviously the whole live streaming thing is predictably become a big deal, and that's what everyone's doing now. But I'm really interested to see the extent to which that endures after this whole thing is over. I suspect that there's going to be there's some sort of change in the way that people listen to music, and in the way that people maybe go out. I definitely think there will be a once it's over, I'm sure there'll be an initial thing where everyone just is out straight away. But I think with the likelihood of there being multiple waves of this shit, it may well be in the kind of medium term that people are less comfortable with being in confined spaces with lots of people just generally.
Yeah.
And then the implications of that for the obvious implications of that for live venues, but in terms of the music, and then what music then develops into, as because dance music is very sort of situational, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
Music is primarily made for a specific function generally, and it'll be really interesting to see what the whole what the streaming thing leads to musically.
Mm-hmm.
It's not at all obvious to me what will happen there at all. I think people generally don't have great systems at home who they listen to tunes on the computer. That may have an impact.
I had a theory, even when there's a new sound, I feel like for a while, things were really, and probably up until right when this stuff all happened, things were really happening a lot in Paris. And when there were these warehouse parties that were taking place, like kind of once concrete kind of ran its, and concrete closed and Rex was still there, but they started doing these warehouse parties outside of Paris. And I was on the outskirts of Paris and then driving even further out, like it was like an hour outside the city. And I thought, there's no way there's going to be people coming to this. This is Paris. People are not going to leave the city for an hour and a half outside. And the place was, and it seems like every single warehouse party that is going on out there, the place is completely full of people going absolutely crazy. And one of the things that struck me was how crazy they were going in relation to how not good the sound system was.
Right. Okay.
And it kind of hit me with some of these producers that were coming out of that whole scene with these Paris warehouse parties and stuff, that I always kind of listen to their tracks outside of that context, and I didn't really, a lot of times the tracks didn't make a lot of sense to me because of the sonic characteristics. And then I went to these parties and I was like, these are the tracks that actually make sense when you can't just solely rely on the sound system for a track to really do work. That really changes things.
I mean, like, the obvious reference I have to this is with dubstep, and with, in particular, early dubstep, which was entirely situational in the sense that it was really all made to be played at Plastic People in London, which isn't open anymore, but that Plastic People sound system had just an insane bass capacity, and much of the music was very little other than bass, right? Very little over 80 hertz and quite a lot below 40 hertz. So like trying to translate that like into other spaces, into other situations, into other, into other like situations around the world, other clubs, really took a lot of time, and I think it wasn't a big surprise that it took so long for it to catch on. I mean, I say so long because, we were plugging away at it from like 2001 until 2006 when people finally started taking notice. But a lot of people, I guess, assumed that it was a kind of overnight success, but it really wasn't. And it was no coincidence, I think, that when it did catch on in a big way, suddenly you got a whole ton more mid-range in the music, I mean, obviously the bass stayed there, but like suddenly there was this kind of big thing in all of the tracks that wasn't there before, and frankly that's when I stopped like engaging. but it's a very it's a key thing, and it really does like affect what people do in the studio in a really sort of fundamental way,
Yeah. And I mean, I always said that, I mean, as we get into this Spotify culture and streaming culture, which, I mean, it really is irrelevant what we as artists think about the equity and how fair it is to artists. At this point, it's the future, and it's going to happen. So figuring out how, like, you might as well embrace it. But my biggest concern has always been that dance music's not necessarily structured for these. It's structured to be a part of a story, and as people,
you mean in individual tracks? You mean
exactly?
Yeah.
Like you said, the 1.5 minute give the DJ time to cue it up, kick drum, and Spotify, I mean, in the nature of, like, I always thought about releasing tracks as, what if you did like a Spotify edit, which would be the equivalent of like a radio edit.
Yep.
And maybe you'll see more of that. It's a real pain in the ass to release separate versions for Spotify versus, but maybe that's the answer to.
Well, I think like with because I mean that's obviously a thing that people have been trying to do. I mean, it's quite interesting actually that the biggest techno playlist on Spotify, the Techno Bunker one, which I think has got like nearly like 1.5 million followers on there, they tend just to post the full length tracks actually. So which kind of confused me a little bit, and it is interesting that, you know, there are that many people wanting to listen to just unmixed, like unformatted, just tunes in a row. And I guess there's a fair bit of flicking through that goes on, but like, you know, as you said, like the average techno tune, not much happens for the first couple minutes, you know. You know?
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting, that to me, and it seems overdue that there's a kind of updating. But I mean, particularly with the way most people DJ now, which doesn't require that 1.5 minutes of kick drum, you know, because the majority of people are using Tractor or whatever, or even on Rekordbox, where you can just, you can loop something up and just, you know, it's not necessary to structure your tunes like that. And actually, I think, to be honest, a large part of the reason why people still do is the inherently conservative nature of the techno scene generally, like, and particularly underground techno. It really is extraordinarily conservative. Like, the people are like very, very set in the way things are done and the way things are perceived, like, you know, the right way in which people perceive things that, you know, should be done, have to be done. It's amazing to me. It's comparable to like classic rock in terms of the way the people who are involved with the making of the music and the audience. It's real kind of it blows my mind, like how, because when you compare it to hip hop, for example, right? Hip hop dominates streaming platforms completely, and it's to a large extent because they embrace the new technology immediately. Like, you know, SoundCloud, for example, was, you know, just like all over. Every hip hop artist was, you know, just posting stuff for free and just embracing this way of consuming music, right?
Yep.
And in techno, we're still like, oh no, you got to like download my shit from Bandcamp or buy a record, even though you'll never play it. Like, it's a real kind of archaic, like little corner of the music industry, techno. And to be honest, like,
on top of demanding a physical product, it's the only. I have friends that are in rock bands and stuff. They're like, so do you have a merch table at your shows? I was like, oh no, you're required to produce merchandise, but you better not ever try to sell your merchandise, because like bands, you know, I mean, if you're a band and
that's a big part of the business model as a band.
Yeah,
you know? Like,
you sell T-shirts, you sell records, like, and people that might, if you can play 50 shows in a year, and you can sell 4 or 5 copies of that record at each show, then you're in good shape.
T-shirts, exactly.
You're in good shape.
Five or 6 T-shirts, and you're away.
Maybe the answer for clubs to really. I mean, and to me, this would really get the gears turning, is clubs. Why the clubs have the capacity to do it. They have, almost every club has a coat check, and they could easily make provide an avenue for people to bring merchandise, and they could sell whatever DJ is playing that night. And honestly, clubs could probably have DJ fees be a little bit less if that kind of became a norm. I think clubs are going to be really struggling through this, and if they would do like I don't know, I just don't see the current model in any way with techno. I don't see it necessarily being able to weather this storm.
Well, I mean, it was in serious trouble anyway. Certainly,
yes.
The kind of club scene infrastructure of it has really struggled over the past few years, partly as a result of festivals becoming more popular and the nature of ticketed events and how they basically eat up people's disposable income. And I think also, like, the rise of Instagram has been extremely significant in the decline in popularity of clubs, because you can't Instagram well from a dark room. And I really think that's extraordinarily depressing as a development, but I think it is significant. And I think it's no surprise that a party like Elro has done so well, given that basically the whole thing there is the spectacle, and it's basically designed to be photographed, basically. So in a way, like, there's a kind of opportunity. I mean, if I was a club owner, or if I used to promote nights, but if I was doing that now, I would be thinking really hard for a way to integrate underground music into a environment that people are going to want to be in, I think, because I think, like, it's changed. People's expectations for a night out and something to spend their money on, an experience to spend their money on, I really think it's shifted quite significantly. And whenever there is a big shift, like, there's an opportunity to take advantage of that, and I think that some people have done, like I said, like, Elro and obviously the festivals, but I think that there's an opportunity for smaller venues and smaller parties to like harness that kind of shift in trend. And I'm sure some parties have done that. I know, for example, like, I mean, there is obviously, like, the flip side of that, which is the reaction to that, which is that there are lots of people who just want to go to a dark room. I mean, like, Posthumans' I Love Acid Party they've been doing great. And that's very much the kind of traditional, like, small club kind of a rave. But I think, like, going, like, what I was saying about how conservative most people are in techno, there is definitely a tendency to moan about this shit and not do anything about it. And it would be better. This is supposed to be futuristic music, right? It's supposed to be, like, an expression of, like, futurism. But I think I really think, like, for it to move forward and particularly in the context of this enormous disruption, there's got to be some kind of, okay, this shit's got to change. Let's embrace something new. And I hope it happens.
So on that note, there's a question from Marcus Anhager on YouTube, and he asked the question, what does it take for a track to wow you? And now I want to think about, let's just talk about what's an example of a track that's wowed you in recent days.
Recent days.
Let's go.
That's a good question. Let me take a look at what I've been listening to. I haven't listened to a whole lot of electronic stuff, to be honest. I've been in the studio writing songs.
You've been writing
what? Let me just take a look at what I've been on.
Yeah, I'm gonna have
I
to
really
look
liked so I was listening to, I mean, this is this is so not the answer you were looking for, but I was listening to Peter Gabriel,
Okay.
his German language stuff.
I
Like
didn't even
there's a
know it
couple of
existed.
a couple of albums from the early 80s, from 81 or something. I think it's just called the German album or the Deutsches album. It's fucking amazing, man. It's so good. And yeah, I was totally blown away by that. You know what? I've got a release plug release coming out on Friday, and people are not listening to promos, man. Like, you usually get like hundreds of responses to a promo. I've had about fucking 5. Yeah, so I don't think I'm alone in not listening to techno at the moment.
No,
But having
no,
said that, I mean,
it's dance music,
you know,
you know.
in answer to the question, like what grabs you in a track, I think like I mean, I'm always interested in like the way like tunes are mixed, which is the reason why I'm always slightly suspicious of people who don't mix their own records. Um, I mean, I'm not going to dismiss that out of hand, but I think it's such a big part of electronic music generally, and especially techno.
It's
Because I
so
mean, like
important that there should at
the kind
least
of
be
like
there
sonic
should at least
aesthetic in that you're trying to achieve in a mix is really like it's integral to a techno tune, right? Completely integral. So I guess like for example, R Rose, his stuff just sounds fucking mind blowing, man. Like
sorry, my
and
phone was
often
ringing.
it's like just the like it's the mix, like and you know to go back to the issues of being conventional, his mix sounds are not conventional. Like
Say
he's got
someone called and I
oh hang
missed
on, I can't
exactly who
hear
you
you.
were talking about. The Peter, are you still talking about the Peter Gabriel stuff?
Say that again.
Who were you talking about? My phone was vibrating and then I didn't hear the artist.
Oh, R Rose.
R Rose, okay.
Yeah.
Yes. And the thing
I
about R Rose is that the like you said, the mix isn't super conventional techno style, like kick drum centric, which I think that that's a pretty rare thing to happen. And I do agree with what you're saying about the mix being such an integral part of a techno track. I think it would make sense. I don't think it's essential that I do my own mix downs for better or for worse.
The mix sounds good, man.
Thank you. I owe you a beer. But I put a lot of time and energy into it, and I don't always think that they're really good, but I think it is such a creative aspect of techno that it's fine if you don't do the mix downs, but I do feel like that person deserves a huge credit for the footprint that they're given. In the same way, like, you know, if Flood produced an album, or, you know, Bob Rock, that DNA is such a part of that album that you can't really decouple. You can't say, well, I'm going to pay, how much can I pay Bob Rock, or how much can I pay Rick Rubin or somebody to not have their name in the credits of the album? And I think that that's really the thing with techno is that we've maybe part of the problem, and Dustin Zahn said this, and this really struck me. He's like, techno has become so DIY that it's almost kind of shot itself in the foot, in that it should, there's a lot of collaborative efforts that are lacking sometimes in techno. Like it's the DIY culture made techno possible, but now with being able to share sessions over email and do like there would be so much more of a collaborative effort available. But I feel like talking about following the norms and everything, that we've kind of been taught to just be the sole proprietor of everything you do. Don't involve anybody else. And if you do involve somebody else, then make sure that no one knows that someone else is involved. And
yeah, totally. I mean, I think that it would be much better if there was like proper crediting, because I don't think it's inherently better to do everything on your own necessarily. I mean, it's easy to have that kind of mindset, but I mean, it shouldn't. I mean, like, obviously the classic like combo is like you have a producer and an engineer and a mix engineer and a mastering engineer,
right.
And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that kind of model at all, really. But we live in this weird kind of like fake world where everyone does everything, but like not many people actually do. And then the people that do like get like frustrated. I mean, I certainly get fucking frustrated when I know someone hasn't done, I know someone hasn't been the primary contributor to a record, and there's no one else fucking credited on it. Like, that drives me fucking up the wall. But
yeah, but I think that
a lot of people don't care is the problem. Like, I think with the average consumer of music, certainly of dance music, like the average person who goes to raves couldn't give a fuck who made the records, and that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, but it's also like, if you, as I understand, the way that the term house, I mean, everybody knows that the term house music came from the Warehouse in Chicago, but the way that it, as I understand, to expound upon that, is back then the DJs that were playing at the Warehouse would actually get on the mic and announce the track.
Yeah, for sure.
And then, so
I mean, Carl Cox still does that.
Yeah. I think every track he plays a lot of tracks that are called "Oh Yes, Oh Yes," but yeah, it's nice that he announces them all. But
and Carl Cox was my fucking hero when I first started. When I first got into techno, I had Fact One, and Fact One is brilliant, man. It really is. Like CD One and Fact One is just fucking banging.
Is that the red? Is that the red and gray one?
No, it's the
That's
green.
Fact Two, right?
Yeah, Fact One is like the greeny one with the orange theme as the first track on CD 2.
The Sound of the Ultimate Bass.
Maybe. I can't remember.
Is that the one with DJ Funk's Run track in it, and it had like
the one with Bass Expansion, Meet My Modem, and Joey Beltram. The hard one with the snares.
I think
Cactus by Union Jack with the like fucking drums and shit.
I wasn't able, because I could only get my music from like Best Buy, and if Best Buy would carry some like Carl Cox and stuff, but I was very limited in which mix CDs I had access to, and for some reason I could get Fact 2, but I couldn't get Fact 1, so now I've got to go.
Oh man, I fucking highly recommend that shit, man. It's shit.
Wait a second. You got to pull your live back up. In the meantime,
just lost the Instagram feed. I'm just setting it up again.
Okay. So there is. Let's see. Let me turn this down.
Yeah, I'm back live.
All right. Let me.
Yo.
There's a couple questions that I wanted to let's see. Patrick Lindsay asked a couple.
Yeah, you should be able to join it.
Huh? We're having trouble loading this live video. Let's go to Scuba Official Live. Let me in. Hold on. It's going to ask request. Patrick Lindsay asked a couple questions. More some statements that I and party hard on that track. Now it's only in loops and staying for a track. Yeah. I mean, I think that there's ways. Okay. Are we good? I'm sideways. Yeah, it's because I'm trying to charge my phone while doing this, but yeah. So I think I got it now. Yeah, overall, I miss the mix CD culture. And you were saying that. But I
mean, that's the thing about streaming services, is that hasn't really been a kind of equivalent. I feel like I'm sort of surprised that there aren't more. They haven't sort of like found a way of like a better way of doing that yet, particularly Spotify. But yeah, I mean, I think like probably like people are looking for video, I think, with consuming mixes online now. I think like Boiler Room has really kind of like cornered that market and sort of made it into a sort of like thing that people really want, like when they listen to a mix online.
It's good to remember.
What were we talking about before?
We were talking about yeah. So the warehouse, they would announce the tracks. The DJ would announce the tracks, and you mentioned Carl Cox does that or still does that. And so there would be a record section in some of the record stores in Chicago where the music that was played at the warehouse, because they would announce, the people at the record store would pull those records and put them in a section in the record store. And so then it was like, where's the warehouse music at? And then it became shortened of people would just come in and say, where's the house music at? Yeah. And but the idea that a DJ was a part of the party, but not like the sole focus of the party. Yeah. And it allowed that party to kind of go through for the rest of the week until the weekend. You know, like you would have the weekend to celebrate the music, and then you would have the next week to shop for the music. Yeah. And I think it's got to become at some point there. I really think that really creative music and techno, it's super important for DJs to elevate that stuff and to I guess reward that behavior and not try to just like keep it to yourself, you know? I mean, like.
So what's your opinion of the DJ as focus of party? What's your opinion on that?
When I'm DJing or when I'm not DJing?
I mean, like generally, like.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's become a bit too much. I think that I mean the DJ for me, a DJ that really interfaces with the crowd is super important. So on one hand, there's like you're forming as a DJ, you're forming a connection with the crowd. And if you have like a really long set, it really feels like when a really long set goes really well, it feels like you kind of know the people by the end of the night. Yep. And that's a super important part of DJing. But at the same time, I think we have to be really honest about like we are playing other people's music.
Yeah.
And I mean, it would be like, I mean, look, if Salvador Dali curated an art exhibit, I would love to go. But it would also be slightly weird if you went into the art exhibit that Salvador Dali curated and he's standing on a platform with spotlights on him instead of the artwork that's around there. So I mean, I get that there's the need for that connection point in a party for people to interface with and to like a kind of call and response thing. But I definitely think that like the party's really coming out of the speakers. And so that, to me, that's, and I have to be also really honest, like if DJs weren't such a focal point, then I probably would have never moved to Europe in the first place. So I can't be like, I have to be honest with myself about what opportunities that's created for me. But April's pretty slow for me right now. So I think that I think it could be a really good reset where producers, now is the time for producers to get the spotlight. Like, I hope.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely don't agree with the view that like the DJ should be behind the curtain or whatever, and it should just be like, you know, it's the party man. I'm pretty skeptical about that. I also am pretty uncomfortable with DJing on a stage generally, like, you know, just the concept of that, like for the reason that you just gave, is a little bit weird to me. And certainly the first few times that I did it, I felt extremely uncomfortable, frankly. I mean, having played in bands and played shows, like a band should be on a stage, right? That's the proper like environment for a live band. But as a DJ, I think it's infinitely preferable to be, you know, near ground level and, you know, as close to the crowd as possible. But at the end of the day, part of your job as a DJ is to be the leader of the party, you know? Like, I think like possibly one of the things that's been lost with the kind of like current wave or most recent wave of DJ culture is the kind of like the promoter as like the sort of flamboyant promoter figure, the promoter as leader of the party, you know? Like, I mean, there are exceptions to that, but like, I know, like, for example, I went to uni with a cousin of Philip Salon, who is a very famous promoter in the 80s and 90s in London, promoted like lots of the big sort of gay nights. And he was like a celebrity in his own right, and he'd probably be as high profile in his events as the DJ was. And you don't really have that anymore. You know, there isn't the kind of impresario sort of like promoter fulfilling that role in clubs and in kind of events. I mean, I recently started following the guy who promoter of Electric Daisy, what's his name, Pasquale, who's a real kind of larger than life figure, you know, and he's the kind of only thing. I'm sure there are exceptions, but like he's certainly an exception to that rule of those things not happening. But it's really the DJ's job now to do that. You know, you're the guy who's got to get the party going, keep it going, and like, you know, like that's a skill in itself. You know, like you say, interaction with crowds. I mean, that's what's so amazing about Sven. Like I saw Sven a few times in the 90s and then didn't see him at all until 3 or 4 years ago. and he's just amazing, like just so charismatic, and just great. So there's a guy looking for scuba diving tutorials. Sorry, mate.
What's that?
Like someone tweeted Husklads for scuba diving tutorials. I think it's paddy.org, mate. Maybe. Don't know. I actually learned to scuba dive relatively recently. I didn't do it for ages, and it was always really embarrassing when people ask me like what my oh, he's being funny. Yeah, you're funny guy.
You can scuba dive.
I can now. Yeah, I learned.
I just got certified too this year.
Really, it's super fun, right?
Oh, it's amazing. And actually, Marcus Roten in the YouTube chat is a big scuba diver as well.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
what's the coolest shit you've seen underwater?
What's the what?
What's the coolest shit that you've seen?
Apparently the most unique thing that I've only scuba dove in but I did one time a dive in Cozumel, Mexico, and but I got certified in Malta. So all of the other dives were in Malta.
Yep.
And all of these dive instructors were freaking out about there was a seahorse.
Right, yeah, they do freak about it, and it's some tiny little thing, right?
Yeah, so I guess it's like finding a 4-leaf clover somehow, and it's not like they're super abundant. And
yeah, I mean, if it was like a kind of like 10-foot long seahorse, you'd be like, what? Shit, right?
Yeah,
like,
so that was probably the most unique thing. But I thought like seeing like huge grouper that were. Yeah, I mean, but Malta is actually there's not a lot of marine life there. There's not a lot of diverse marine life.
Yeah. Yep.
Kind of an underwater World War II museum, actually.
Wow, yeah, there must be fuckloads of
Yeah. What about you? What's the best thing you've seen?
So I saw a couple of really big eagle rays once, which were like they were just kind of flapping by, and then one of them started hunting something, and the fucking thing was moving. I've never seen anything move so fast in my life, and it was this huge fucking thing, which went from being this kind of serene, kind of just graceful creature to just fucking darting around. It was massive as well. It was like, I don't know, 6 foot across or something. And then also that was in Mauritius, and then I was diving in just off Koh Phangan in Thailand last year, and there was this enormous school of barracuda, like fucking thousands of them, like thousands and thousands and thousands, and just was able to just like swim right into the middle of it and just completely just enveloped in like these thousands of like fucking silver. Yeah, I mean, that's what I find with scuba diving is nothing happens for ages, and then you'll have one thing that happens in the dive and you're just like, oh my god, that's fucking why I'm down here. Jesus.
Yeah, it's a very meditative
topic here anyway.
Yeah, but I love that maybe somebody out there just Googled or searched on YouTube for scuba and actually found scuba talking about scuba diving, and they might think that you're a dive instructor. And so there you go. DJ being the focus of the party and hopefully setting the reset. I mean, funny that Richie Houghton has become such a kind of a Ibiza icon type thing. But the first party that I ever saw that I was like, holy shit, this is the craziest shit I've ever seen, was Richie Houghton playing in Detroit. It was a movement. Before it was movement, it was like DEMF, and he played at an after party at this place called City Club, and these were first off, the opening DJ, it was like that was when he first started bringing Magda out with him, and I had never heard of her. And the sound system in this room was so crazy. I literally couldn't breathe through my nose when I was next to the sound system. And that was when Magda was playing. And if you've ever
back, what, 2006 or something, 2005?
that was 2001, I think.
Right, yeah. So yeah.
So and it was like this 4-corner quadraphonic sound system, and he actually was using the DP4 to throw around. Like, he had these vocal loops that were being thrown around the room, around your head, and he was controlling the lights, controlling the like fog machine, and controlling the turntables, like CD decks and all of that.
And Richie in 2001 was something else, man.
I mean, he was tucked away in this like little hole. So you really could see like his little bald head and his glasses popping up above, but it was a goth kind of fetish club. And the DJ really wasn't like, if anything, in those type of environments, I think the DJ would be kind of like an unwanted onlooker in some way. So they kind of tuck him to the corner, and the party, there was no question that this was Richie Hawtin's party, but he wasn't on this huge platform with the light shining on. There was like literally one red light in the DJ booth, and I think it was just red to not illuminate the room too much so he could see his stuff. And then there was a strobe light, and the sonics of the place. I remember being in the crowd of people, and I'm like, who the hell's throwing shit on my head? And then the strobe lights went on, and I look up, and parts of the ceiling are just like crumbling onto your head. And it just like, if he set those parties up in Berlin and was still doing that type of thing, like, clubs would be in trouble.
Yeah, totally, man. I mean, yeah. I don't know who the equivalent now is of Richie back then. I don't think there is one, to be honest.
No. Scuba versus SCB is what I'm getting asked by Marcus Rolton on the...
Well, the difference between the two things?
The difference, or how one of them, how the SCB thing came about, if your valves weren't working on your keyboard at that day, or...
Well, basically, what it originally was basically, I mean, I was obviously doing dubstep, and dubstep sort of inflected stuff, but all quite quick tempos. And then SCB was just really my like house and techno thing initially. I think it wasn't supposed to be another alias initially. It was just actually the name. I remixed my own track. Well, track off my first album, I did a slowed down house mix, well, sort of like minimally type house mix, and called it just the SCB edit. And it was in the days before you had to, before basically digital, so you had to tag each, everything and the metadata and all that kind of shit. Before that, so you could just write whatever you want on the record. So I just, it wasn't supposed to be an alias. And over the years, it's kind of just gradually basically turned into whatever I'm not doing as Scuba, I call it SCB, which is, I realize, fairly unhelpful for anyone trying to follow me. But basically, I did the album, the Kaibu album, as SCB because I had been doing techno with Scuba for a while, and it was me sort of preempting wanting to stop doing techno as Scuba, so I made this techno album as SCB, and I've been really making sort of house and type more melodic stuff as Scuba, and I've been basically, as I said earlier, been writing songs and recording songs, and the next Scuba album is basically going to be free. Oh, yeah. Actually, I'm not going to say what it is going to be, but let's just say it's going to be different to previous
Free jazz.
Scuba, and certainly different to SCB. And so, I mean, I've do have a bunch of SCB material written, and it's sort of techno type stuff. I don't know if I'm going to put it out or whatever, but yeah, it's like I said, it's basically the way I see it is like whatever I'm doing as my principal thing. SCV is the shit that I do when I want to break from that shit, basically.
Yeah. Well, what? So obviously you've produced. By techno standards, you've produced a pretty wide gamut of music. What was something that you wish that you would have known when you first started producing?
I wish I would have known. I think principally, I wish I had more confidence in myself. I mean, I think like I was always, and I was certainly when I first started out, because I'm self-taught and because it's all been very DIY. I think like all artists or anyone who's doing anything creative is inherently insecure, but also at the same time has that degree of sort of like borderline arrogance to actually get your shit out there, and like, you know, to actually have the attitude that, well, I've made this shit, people should listen to it. That's a fairly arrogant way of thinking, really, at a fundamental level. But I generally think that you know, I wish I'd had more confidence in myself, and I wish I'd you know, pushed. My lack of confidence kind of manifested itself in sort of like holding back, you know, and not pushing as hard as I could have done, and just, you know, feeling that I wasn't capable of doing things, or kind of suspecting that I was, but like, you know, thinking, oh no, I'll do that later or whatever. I think you know, what I would encourage people to do who are starting out really is to like think as big as possible. Basically, don't be like hamstrung by, you know, like feeling that you have limitations. I mean, everyone obviously does have limitations, but I think that the more you can get out of the mindset of, you know, like feeling trapped by your own perceptions of your limits, I think the better you'll do, you know. And I was definitely, I, you know, still am to an extent, like, you know, just like kind of restricted by that, you know. So yeah. I definitely feel like if I was starting now, then I you know, as I was saying earlier, I never really had a kind of mentor, someone telling me what to do, and I wish I'd had someone, you know, really like telling me that, you know, like laying it on the line in that kind of a way. But I mean, it's easy to say that, you know, it is very easy to say that. It's actually putting it into practice is a different thing entirely. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what you said. With I tended to I got really lucky at the start of my career, in that it just happened to be like right place, right time. And Adam Bear was ramping drum code back up after kind of a long hiatus when the distributor had kind of gone out. And so, and obviously for those who might not know, drum code sounded a lot different in the past. And so he wrote me and requested some tracks, that he had heard some tracks from me through a friend, and requested for me to do an EP right out of the gate. And that was kind of like, I was super lucky to start out at on such a platform. But one thing that I learned, and Adam started kind of taking drum code in a different direction musically. And I was so, that my identity was so caught up in one person's approval of my music that there was really a time where if Adam didn't like the track, I was kind of lost. And that wasn't anything that wasn't something that Adam put on me or anything like that, but it was the only thing that was connected to my musical identity. Like I would play my first gigs and I'd get in the car and the promoter would ask what Adam Bear is like, you know? And I was like, hi, I'm Kyle, by the way. But that was really and so there was a time where Adam had taken drum code in a different direction. And if I'm honest with myself, my productions I was in a huge slump musically, but I was so focused on chasing that dragon that I feel like I missed out on a lot of possible creative moments of finding that could have been a time to really find my own sound. And I hear a lot of new producers, they get so discouraged when somebody never listens to their demos, or when they send out their music to 20 different labels or something and no one responds. And I'm like, that does not mean it's not good. And that definitely doesn't mean that you don't have anything to say. And sometimes you have something to say before you know how to say it well. And a lot of times you get tracks from people and you kind of know, you're like, I understand what you're trying to say in this. And man, I can't wait to hear what you're saying in a year, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously we get sent a lot of music for Hot Flush, and I have that exact experience a lot, and it's really difficult to know because everyone's creative process is different, and everyone's obviously psychology is different. It's really difficult to know how best to advise people to get the best, get those things realized and get those ideas in fully formed, a fully formed thing, whatever, to just run out of words there. But yeah, I mean, I think it's super interesting at a psychological level what people react to. My best example of it really was with Mount Kimby, and they were sending me stuff from really early on, very, very undeveloped demos. And I was, fairly, I was quite specific in, my suggestions, and and it ended up working out really well. But I had experience with people where I've tried to be specific and it hasn't worked at all. And a lot of people just don't, react well to being given specific instructions. And a lot of times, I mean, for certain people, you've got to be much broader, and it's tricky. Someone actually asked the question, which I think was quite a good one.
I'm not seeing the Instagram ones, and you're not seeing the YouTube ones, I think. So
okay, well, someone's asked, and it's Illidoscope. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I'm definitely not pronouncing it right. What is an absolute don't do as a producer? That's a good question. Give me yours.
Yeah, Gosh, that's hard. That's a hard one to say because like if you think about some of the like coolest shit you've ever heard, it's like stuff that you shouldn't really do. Like, I mean, think of this as like this isn't really applying to our genre of music, but let's just for lack of like think of using a compressor. Like I always tell people, a compressor is a mix tool, but it's also a creative tool. And like I don't think the compressor was necessarily built to like squash down and then bring up the like create such a modulation in the levels. And so like I'm sure that the creator of the compressor would be like, don't do that, you know? And so it's hard to say like don't ever do this one thing. Say what you've got something on your mind, and I'm gonna think of this while you're answering. I know that you've got a list of things.
I mean, I actually think that there isn't anything that you should never do, to be honest. And that's just what's come to me as you said, you've got something on your mind. Because I was thinking of things and like, don't be too obsessed with. I mean, probably if I was going to say one thing, actually, I would say don't be too obsessed with mixing down, because that is a rabbit hole that you can disappear down for years, literally, and never come back again. Like I think you can very easily lose all sight of creativity by thinking about the mix as the kind of primary thing when you're making a tune. And I said earlier that I don't really trust people that don't mix down their tunes, and that's going a little bit far. And I do think it's important. But when you're writing a track, write the track. Like write the riffs, because I mean, like you can make it sound good and in the mix, and make it add a certain kind of sonic identity to it during a mix down process, but making the riff in the first place is the important bit, So
what did you say? You said on
if I was going to say something, I would say that don't fucking go mad about mix downs. Don't disappear down the mix down hole. But seriously, there is really nothing that there shouldn't be anything that you never do when you're making music. I don't think. Like when I listen to classical music, for example, like you can really tell the difference in like periods of, for example, like music that was written in the late 18th century. There are things that are just never done. There is a real kind of like prescriptive set of rules. And sometimes that can be useful, sometimes it can be useful to set yourself parameters. But then you listen to music, orchestral music that was written a century later, and what's happened is that certain composers have said, "Fuck that! I'm going to do what I want. So I'm going to modulate to a certain key. I'm going to, whatever, different harmonic structure or whatever." And really, that's how progress happens. So
and
I'd say never say don't do something. I mean,
I would say
don't clash your fucking kick drums, but like
yeah. I would also say like, I mean, there's a lot of things that sound good on paper, like ska music, like mix like rock and jazz or something, and it just never really pans out. But then there's other things. Sorry if you're a ska music lover, but the
I like the specials.
But if you describe to me how a like Levon Vincent track or a Radio Slave track works, you would say, "Gosh, that sounds so boring." Like they're like, "Okay, so there's this loop and it's going for 4 minutes."
Yeah, this should be bad. this should be bad, but it's not. Like
no, and then you're like, and then a hi-hat comes in, and it's like, wow. Yeah, but when you actually hear that, it makes all the sense in the world.
Like genuinely, one of the most memorable experiences of my life was musical life. Anyway, was the first time I went to Panorama. When I moved to Berlin in 2007, that was the kind of tail end of the minimal thing, and I'd never really done it in London. I'd never really been out to much minimal. And the first time I went into P-Bar, it must have been like September 2007 or something. And it was a Friday, so only P-Bar was open. And I was just stood at the bar, literally just walked in, and it was just real sort of loopy, just kick. And then this little hat came in, and the place went fucking mental. Like it literally went up. It was like, and it was like, I fucking blew my mind, man. It was great. It was such a fucking, and I was just like, oh man, I have got to play at this fucking venue. Like even though the music I was doing, I was couldn't have been more different to that. But it was just like, wow, this is just something else, something completely like incongruous with everything I understand about the way clubs work, the way raves work. So
and you would never so how can we tell what's something you should never do as a producer? Like it would make as much sense to say you should never do something as a producer. Like I would never, if I was telling someone how to make a track, I would never say have a loop go for 4 minutes and then have a small closed hi-hat come in after that,
right.
And so if all these theoretical things don't really make sense when it's really about a feeling, when you have you hear these stories about James Brown and just there wasn't a click track. There wasn't this thing going on. It's you just had to feel it, you had to, and
I was listening to an interview with one of the guys who, forget his name, but a sound engineer from the 70s, basically, who had engineered a bunch of Aerosmith records. And he was talking about their residency in Vegas recently, and how they were trying to set up a click and play the songs to a click. But they couldn't do the old songs like that because they just didn't sound right, because it's basically all out, the chorus speeds up, not 10 BPM, but the chorus will speed up 3-4 BPM. And if you don't do that, it just sounds completely flat, and it's interesting that electronic music is necessarily, fixed in that way. Well, I mean, obviously not every, size 9, I am ready, whatever. There are differences that there are examples of that happening in music, but it's just the concept of having the chorus speed up, for 30 seconds and then you speed back down. It's a real kind of, that's what I find. I mean, personally, recently I've found really fun about not writing dance music, not writing electronic music, and just being able to get into those little things, which are you're basically.
Was it asked if was it Jack Douglas?
It was on the Bob Lefsett's podcast. Bob Lefsett's podcast is fucking brilliant, man. It really is. It's so good. I don't know if you get his newsletter, and he's kind of a funny guy generally, but his podcast he has so many good people on. There's a great one with Leo Cohen and shit like that. So it's fucking really
send me a link so I can post it on the
we'll do. He's a legend. So many good ones. There's a great one actually with Daniel Glass from Glass Note Records, who started off as a DJ in New York in the mid 80s, and now runs Glass Note, which is one of the bigger independents. Got some pretty cool stuff on the catalog. And I love that. I love listening to that kind of shit, because what I've always felt is that there is so much to be learned and applied. So much to be learned outside of the dance world, which is completely applicable to everything that we do within electronic music, which is why I'm so frustrated by, as I was saying earlier, how conservative much of the techno and the house and techno scene is. And I think a lot of it is because a lot of people just don't look outside of that, little space, like the amount of times I've smashed my head against metaphorically smashed my head against the desk when reading people moan about like Spotify payback rates and that kind of shit. It's just like, no.
It's not a good payback rate.
They pay out 80% of their revenues in royalties.
Well, you know how much money Spotify makes on each user? Negative $1 per month. Right. So this is really the question with the thing is that they are.
You mean because they're burning through so much venture capital? You mean? Is that what you mean?
They're losing. Basically, I think it's one of those things where, like, a really good friend of mine's a really good chef, and he's from Israel, and he opened up an Israeli restaurant here in Berlin, and has moved on to open up another restaurant, and is gonna, well, now things are tricky, but he's gonna open up a third restaurant. And he always said to people, he's like, Kyle, I don't know what people are doing. They come in and they say, why are you selling seven euro hummus? This should be €3. He said, well, go get €3 hummus, and it's like at some point, I mean, I think about this with Netflix. Like, what does this mean when we're paying €10 a month for the world of entertainment at our fingertips? Like, right now it's really cool. In the same way it was really cool when I was freshman year in university, and Napster, it was my first time hearing the word Napster and the first time hearing the word high-speed internet. And that was an amazing combination, and it was a free-for-all. And sometimes, I mean, it's very hard. I understand. Look, I have an Amazon Prime subscription, so like, but there are.
I mean, the amount of money that I used to spend on CDs, and I'm sure you're the same. Like, I used to burn through a ridiculous amount, like all my fucking like spare, all my like Saturday job money, all my the parental allowance when I was a kid. I used to smash through that on CDs, and they were so expensive. Like fucking, I remember 1991 paying like £15 for like Metallica Black Album. Like, that's an insane amount of money, like ridiculous. And but
you would listen to it. You would listen to it how many times?
I fucking did, yeah. And like, I mean, as a it's very easy to be nostalgic for that kind of shit. But like, if you'd said you can pay £2.50 a week for Spotify and you can listen to everything, I mean, I'm an unabashed Spotify, like, I love it. I think it's a brilliant service. Like, forget about my business, whatever, all that kind of shit. Like, as a completely objective, like, observer of the service, I just think it's brilliant. Like, I've just discovered so much shit on there. There's so much stuff, like, that I go back to from years ago, and I just think it's great, frankly. Like,
I would say with the whole, like, Spotify does pay out a lot of their revenues to the artists, but the question would be when you go to do payroll for a company, and like most places have a minimum wage, and if you go to do payroll and you're using that much of your revenue to do payroll, then you can't go any lower on that, then the reality of it is that you need to raise your prices. And the thing that I have with Spotify is it's kind of, for me, all of these streaming companies it's a race to the bottom, and they're trying to oust each other and outdo the competition. You should not be allowed to operate just continuously at a loss. And then, because once there's a monopoly there, then they're going to be like, hey, we're losing money. We can't pay you any more than what
One of the interesting things that actually Leo Cohen said in his Bob Lefsetz's interview was that, because he's basically he's currently the head of music at YouTube, and what he was saying was that really, for the market to function effectively, there needs to be minimum 3, ideally 4 or 5, like, significant players in it, and for there to be a kind of healthy competition between those platforms. I mean, like, obviously with room for much smaller ones as well. So similar basically to the kind of like retail environment was up to the 90s, with like the big chains, and then smaller independent stores, and there sort of is that now, kind of. I mean, like there certainly isn't a single service which is running away with it. I mean, obviously, like, Spotify has the first mover advantage, and obviously Amazon has its Prime thing, which is obviously tagged on to loads of other stuff. So many people have got a Prime subscription who don't use it for music and probably aren't aware that you can get music from it. But there is definitely a risk as well for there to be a kind of like hegemonic entity emerge from that existing marketplace, and that would be extremely unhealthy, like really, really bad. But we're not there yet. And I think maybe you're right in that, like, prices may have to rise. But I mean, I'm not even necessarily sure that's the case. Like I said, I don't have a big problem with like payout rates. I think maybe the formula could change. I mean, the pro rata formula isn't ideal, but I mean, I'm definitely sympathetic to the argument that, like, doing a direct payment model would be, with the data requirements are like vastly increased, and it would cost a ton more money to run that kind of a system. So I can kind of like sympathize a bit with that. I definitely don't agree with the idea that it's just inherently shit and it's fucked music, because it's just not true. It's like there's more money in recorded music now than there has been for many a year, many a fucking year. And no, it's not like as profitable now as the CD model was, but the CD model was a fucking rip-off to the consumer, right? It was a fucking joke. Like, it was a fucking, and everyone was getting ripped off by the big companies. The artists were getting ripped off, but actually the revenue, the overall market was so big they still made bank, but they didn't make anything like what they should have done. Like, I think the average record deal now is a lot fairer. Like 50-50 splits are, and joint ventures are not uncommon, even with sort of, not with majors, but with the bigger indies. Like, you can expect to get a much better royalty rate. But like in the sort of period between the end of the CD market, in the early, basically what Napster did, and the emergence of streaming, that was fucked up, man. Like, the market just, the overall music market just fucking collapsed in terms of revenue. And like, so for people to moan, I'm going on a massive rant now, I realize, but for people,
I would have never predicted
about this. It's just ridiculous, and like, like nostalgia for this download model, which fucking was no good to anyone.
Well, I think
I'm not saying it's perfect now. I'm not saying it's perfect at all, but it's a fuck of a lot better than what it was. And it's good. And as a consumer of this shit, I fucking love it. So whatever.
I think, look, there have been months in my life as a professional DJ, musician, whatever. There have been months where I have not earned a penny. And I think something that I hope comes from like, I've never been owed a penny for, like, this idea that if you do music, it's a career in music's a giant lottery. And it is I would say more often than not, I've been on the beneficial end of the lottery. And of course, if I compare myself to someone like yourself or Houghton or someone like that, then it starts looking like I'm just at the, but it's all relative. And I think it's really, really destructive for the creativity of music to become so obsessed with how we can, like, I think it's super important that people that work at grocery stores get a living wage. I think it's super important that people who are accountants, school teachers, and all of these fields get a living wage. Like, with music, it's really hard for me. I mean, obviously I'm super happy for the like, Germany's got a great health insurance built for musicians, and I'm super thankful for that. But I don't think I'm owed a certain salary a year because I'm doing music. And music's one of those weird things where, like, I started out and I played gigs for free, and there will come a day where I will return to playing. I mean, it's like, I'm super lucky to be in the situation that I'm in, but I think we've become so obsessed with the ability to monetize something for it to have value. And I hope that now that there is absolutely no way to monetize music at the moment, except for the Spotify nickels, but hopefully it'll restore the priority to create something because you've got something to say, and to really, I just feel like it. I told you before we did this thing that I used to do, like, these AMA things, and if I did a question and answer session, it would be like 70 or 80% of the questions would be talking about how to have a career in music. And it was never about like how to create this feeling or what were you like. And now it feels like so many people are excited about creating. And that's an amazing thing. And it's no longer like about trying to create elbow room and trying, like, it's just it would be a futile effort right now to figure out ways for someone like us to make a living wage in these times.
Yeah, I tell you, man. So we've been going 2 hours. I think that might be a good place to end. That was a nice little bookend.
And we didn't destroy our careers.
Again?
In 2 hours.
Yeah, man. Okay, nice one. This has been great. It's been fun. We should definitely do it again.
Let's do it again. Good to talk to you.
Cool, man. Okay, and thanks everyone for listening. We'll be around soon sometime. Cool.
All right.
Cheers, guys. Nice talk.
Bye-bye.